I'm Emily Hawthorne, a Middle East and North Africa analyst at Stratfor, a RANE company. This podcast is brought to you by Stratfor Worldview, RANE's premier digital publication for objective geopolitical intelligence and analyses. Sign up for the free Stratfor newsletter at worldview.stratfor.com.
You're listening to RANE's Essential Geopolitics podcast, powered by Stratfor. I'm Emily Donahue. On June 10th, China passed and implemented its anti-foreign sanctions law. Although it's in effect, it's not yet clear what strategy China might use to fight back against foreign sanctions. Chase Blazik is here to place this law in context. He's Stratfor Asia-Pacific analyst at RANE. Chase, it's good to have you back on the podcast.
Hi, Emily. Nice to speak with you again.
Well, I've seen this law called China's Anti-Foreign Sanctions Law, but is it that simple? What are some of the details of this law?
So it's intentionally vague, and that's probably the first point to take away from it. In general, there's two parts. The first is that any entities, including businesses or individuals, in or out of China must not comply with foreign laws that China views as, quote, discriminatory restrictive measures, unquote. What does that mean? It goes through a number of points in the law trying to punt at what that means, but in general, it's any foreign laws that interfere in China's internal affairs and or impinge on the rights or interests of Chinese citizens or organizations. Vague enough right there, but they also add a little addendum on the end of the law saying that any foreign laws that also endanger sovereignty or national security or China's national development interests, again, quite broad, could induce some of the measures in this law. That's one part. And the other part is that Chinese or any entities within China must implement China's own countermeasures against these laws. These countermeasures can include visa restrictions, asset freezes or seizures, as well as bans on transacting with Chinese entities, and any other necessary measures that China would like to add on to this. So the key there is that companies will be restricted on both sides from China and their home government as far as foreign sanctions implementation, and the definitions are intentionally broad.
Chase, how should non-Chinese companies, especially foreign ones, respond to this new law?
Interestingly, the law doesn't actually specify between foreign and Chinese companies, but in general, you're right. Foreign companies are going to be the ones that are most concerned about this and what they can do to counteract the effects of this law. First off, it's early days, so we're still waiting for some sort of implementation guidelines to come out, which usually accompanies China's laws, and early cases of Beijing implementing the law to see who China is targeting and for what reasons. But honestly, the early consensus among legal scholars is that there's not much companies can do, and that's because China's implementation of this law will likely be politically motivated and used for other foreign policy goals. Now, it's worth noting that China is not likely to wield this law against any and all, right? It will be very particular companies and countries against which China uses this law. But China will continue using it as a sort of legal cover for its ongoing practices against foreign sanctions, which are quite broad. There are still some risk mitigation tactics companies can take. First and foremost is avoiding contact with politically, I guess you could say, radioactive firms. These could include those in Xinjiang that may or may not be using forced labor, right? But these would all have to be done preemptively, right? Because the new anti-foreign sanctions law is meant to keep companies from stopping business with these potentially radioactive firms. So you'd have to kind of get ahead of the news. And companies can also keep tabs on their own suppliers to know who they're doing business with and who their suppliers might be doing business with that might get hit by these same sanctions or countermeasures.
So what does this law say about China's changing approach to foreign sanctions?
Well, it certainly doesn't limit Beijing's tools for sanctions responses. Instead, I believe it's meant to expand China's tool set and give China a sort of standard operating procedure, right? But China will continue using ad hoc measures to counter foreign sanctions or any foreign laws, such as tariffs and import bans, non-tariff barriers such as phytosanitary standards, goods boycotts, e-commerce bans, etc. What it does show is China has an increasing desire to be seen as a country that plays within the framework of both domestic and international law. And China does genuinely want to develop this sort of legal framework in order to improve its society overall. But it's crucial that Beijing is not willing to do the one thing that's critical for legal system development long term, and that's removing party influence over the courts and the laws. We saw this recently with Xi Jinping's campaign for the courts and the legal systems to abide first and foremost by political correctness and the party line, which is party ideology, before applying the laws of China, right? So this law seems much more like it's going to be a way to provide legal cover for China's broad responses to foreign laws going forward.
Chase Blazik is a Stratfor Asia Pacific analyst at RANE. Thank you so much, Chase.
Thank you, Emily.
Chase delivers regular intelligence updates on the geopolitics of China, including the U.S.-China competition. You can get all of the updates from our team of expert analysts delivered straight to your inbox. Sign up for the Stratfor Worldview newsletter from RANE. Sign up today at worldview.stratfor.com. That's worldview.stratfor.com. I'm Emily Donahue. Thanks for listening.